At 28 years old, I was shot and paralyzed from the chest down. I had two options. I could stop and let the things I cannot control me, or I could move forward and put my energy into things that would improve my life and those around me. I chose to move forward and surround myself with risk takers, innovators, and leaders who've chosen the same path. Join us on the journey. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Forward with me, Derek Herrera, and our guest today, Martha Raddatz. Martha is a truly amazing person. She's an award-winning journalist and had a phenomenal career. And I was fortunate to meet her through the Bob Woodruff Foundation a few years ago and have stayed in touch and become friends since. She's spent her career covering politics, government, military operations across the globe. And some of the most interesting things we talked about was the perspective that she gleaned from being on the front lines in combat operations and military operations, seeing firsthand what service members are doing and talking to leadership there, and then flying back to ask questions of our elected officials in the days that followed. And so really impressive how she was able to pursue that and ask these relevant questions to try to uncover knowledge and share the stories of what we were doing in these conflicts abroad. Her main goal and passion for this work was inspired out of her curiosity and respect for what our service members go forward and do when they answer the call on behalf of our nation. She's incredibly resilient, and anybody who has any question about that can just go back and watch the presidential debates where she was the moderator for candidates Trump and Hillary Clinton in 2016. And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to discuss that much during this podcast, but hopefully we'll have her back on and talk even more about resilience and adaptability. Honored to share this episode with you. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review so that we can help scale our impact and reach even more people who may not be part of our tribe. I am so excited to share this episode of Forward with Martha Raddatz, and truly hope you enjoy this conversation. I'm here with Martha Raddatz. Martha, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you, Derek. It's been way too long.
Pleasure's all mine. No, thank you for making time to do this, and appreciate your willingness to support. So with our podcast, I was reviewing your background, and you've got a very long and illustrious career and doing some things. But the thing that stuck out to me, which was really interesting, was your willingness to take risk. And so going all the way back to college, you chose to drop out of college to pursue, the career you were experiencing. So I wanted to know, just like taking you back when and how, so try to learn a little bit more about you and how you assess risk and make these types of decisions and everything else.
Okay, I dropped out of college because I was an idiot for no better reason than that. I think I just thought, well, I'm doing something I like. Why should I finish? And I had like a year left, probably less. And I think it was just sort of a rebellious thing. And I didn't particularly like college. I didn't like the college I was in. I didn't feel particularly challenged. So it was just one of those like, who needs this? But honestly, it was a mistake. I think it's one of those things that sounds great when you have a successful career way, way beyond that. But it made things a little tougher. It really did. And I joke that, I couldn't actually go teach a class because I don't have a college degree in certain places. So I did get, probably much to the embarrassment of my son, I gave his commencement address, and they gave me an honorary PhD when he got his degree. So I was like, sorry, kid, I know you had to work for this, but I just breezed in and picked this up. So. But a little risky for sure.
She went straight from high school to doctor, so I didn't realize I should be calling you Dr. Raddatz, not Martha.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Sure.
That's awesome. And so moving forward, you were always interested in, it seems like, you found from an early age that this was your passion and your career that you wanted to pursue. How did you get into covering military operations and war and all these sorts of things?
I think, when I see young people who come to ABC now, who know what they want to do, who say they knew when they were really young. Our David Muir, I think, here at ABC was practicing when he was like 8. I don't really think I did know what I wanted to do. And my mom, my single mom, had worked in a local TV newsroom. So I was kind of around it, but she was a secretary. She wasn't the correspondent or anything else. She was working hard there in the front office. But I was kind of around it, but I didn't really think about that as a career. I had no idea what I wanted to do, really. But then when I got sort of a menial job at a local TV station, I just liked the excitement. And I think the one thing that has guided me all these years is just a curiosity. And I, sort of, no matter what story I get, and I get some obviously really fascinating ones, but even very early in my career, no matter what it was, I just wanted to know more. And I suppose that's the sign of someone who probably should be a journalist and should be a reporter, because you just want to know more. It kind of like every subject fascinates me, and I want to just dig deeper. So the way I ended up with the military, though, is kind of a fluke, really. I mean, I was always interested in it. I read books that I really liked about the military and sort of who these people are, and what motivates you, and how do you overcome fears, and all those things. But when this is probably my biggest life challenge. When I worked in local TV in Boston, and when my husband got a job in DC, so we moved to DC, and I was 8 months pregnant, so unemployed. I'd left a pretty great job in Boston as a local TV correspondent, and basically when I moved here, and I thought I had a shot at working at ABC Network, but I arrived right when they were doing layoffs. Also 8 months pregnant, not easy to get a job, just gotta say. Maybe it is now, but it sure wasn't then. And so I kind of freelanced at CNN for a while, and I didn't love that because it was all just live shot after live shot, and I wanted to kind of do more stories. And then I ended up at NPR, and NPR had a job opening for the Pentagon. And I thought, well, that sounds great, because I think the military is really interesting. It was peacetime, but I started just immersing myself in the culture. It was a wonderful thing to do, because I knew nothing about it. I didn't know anybody in the military. Probably no college boyfriend briefly, but it wasn't about the military. So I started out with kind of a clean slate, but I started out with respect, and I think that's what you have to have when you cover any beat. I mean, go in, respect, find out what you have to find out, and the people I respect most are those who, if there's something that's gone wrong, talk to me about it. But it's from there, then 9/11 happened, and like so many, it changed your life, changed my life. That became my principal beat, and then Iraq, and I spent so many years in Iraq. But my passion about it comes from just feeling like it's so important to tell the stories of our military, and to tell the story of war. And I can't think of any beat that's more profound, and that has a bigger reach. I mean, it's not always about war. It's about national security. It's about foreign affairs. It's about the world. And if I loved local TV stories, I really love covering the world. And even in local TV, I was covering the world. When I worked in Boston, it was at a time when we were doing a lot of international travel, and there have been times here at ABC, when I was eventually hired here at ABC, that we have used stories that I did like in 1981, and kind of looked back, it's one huge advantage about being older is that you have a body of work, and you can look at war, you can look at how things change, and learn so much about the world and about people.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and to your point, one of the things I think has been similar, and I think why it's been so interesting to learn about all your experience, and the trait you brought up is curiosity. I think that's found a lot within the military, but then also, I'm finding myself, having been an entrepreneur now for a little while, seeing similar levels of curiosity and almost, obsession, right, with solving problems. So that's really impressive, and I think a good parallel for some of the things that I didn't quite know, but it makes sense, and makes sense that would be something that would benefit any sort of journalist in that regard, is just having that true curiosity. It's amazing in that.
And it's kind of a disciplined curiosity, right? I mean, it's like I have to channel my curiosity into something that will inform others, and that can be really challenging in how you do it. I was just talking to a new intern we hired, and was saying, look, there are evenings when I'm on the news when it's 45 seconds, but in those 45, I mean, just if it's a really big news day, and that's how much time I have, you got to figure out a way to tell that story in a way that's, I don't care if it's 3 lines, that you've informed in some way, no matter how long you are, or how short you're on. But it is, I love that you call it problem solving, because that's a big thing to me as a mom too, that I'm always talk to my kids about, is just solving problems. I had a funny thing a few weeks ago, and we were at a wedding, and my son, who's young, married, and the next day his wife's flight was canceled, and he came into me and was like, Mom, what do you think I should do? I said, well, talk to Karen about her. Why don't we figure out a way? He goes, no, Mom, I want to solve the problem before I upset her. I'm like, I thought that was so sweet.
That's awesome.
You probably experienced stuff like that, huh?
You trained him well. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, my wife's the same way. She, she has an amazing family, and my in-laws are amazing, and so, they helped solve a lot of problems for her, and that was one of the things she said was attractive about me, and helped her be more attracted to me, was that, like, I had a bias fraction, and was, like, very set on problem solving, and so she kind of jokes now, and she's like, yeah, just like a lot of people say, like, married my dad, right? And it's like, yeah, in some respects, yeah. So
she found her father's good traits
for sure
in you.
For sure,
that's good.
That's awesome. And so the choice after September 11th, though, to go and go forward and take risk to be in that position to cover those stories, I'm sure they weren't forcing you to do that, but like the choice to make, to go continued and repeatedly to go to these, combat zones to cover these stories and to learn and to share. What was going through your mind, or like how did you approach that mentally, and what really drove you to push forward, to move and do that?
I think probably like you, Derek, people who didn't know you or don't understand what you did and what I do is that nobody's fearless. If you are, you're a problem, right? but you find purpose in your risk taking and in your fear, and you weigh risk. I mean, you can't get rid of it, no way, altogether. But for me, it was a purpose, and it was a purpose to inform people, and certainly in Iraq and Afghanistan too, that what is this about? Why? If the American public really needs to know about war, they really need to know what our service members do, why they do it, how it works. That I mean, the lack of knowledge in general about what services are and what the military does is kind of astonishing. So I try patiently to tell people about it and inform and show that human side, and these are not people who really want to just get over there and kill people, okay? And it's not their policy. I mean, just even how civilian control works and how the military works in general, and you know what happens in these countries we go into, I just think is important. And you know, sort of embedding with the military all those years, that's not the whole story. You can't tell the story of Afghanistan or Iraq by just being with the military. And if I'm not doing that, we have other reporters doing that, but I try to do as much as I can of that story. And it's also just context-wise. I don't want to stereotype our service members or what they do and how they do it. And so to me, the risk was worth it. I mean, there were times in the end, it's like, okay, are people paying attention to this? How do I get them to pay attention to this? And is it worth the risk in this particular instance? So I'm certainly not careless, but yeah, I you know, I've taken risks and I continue to do that, and I think it's worth it. It's you know, you have two young boys. My kids are grown, but they weren't when I was going, particularly my son, who's 29. So when I started, you know, he was 9 on 9/11. That was tough. I think that was the toughest part. I think my daughter was old enough. But I always explained to them, you know, if you think it's bad with me over there, I get to come home after 2 or 3 weeks, and these guys and women are over there for years at a time, over and over and over and over and over again. And I know they appreciated that. I mean, my son would especially say it wasn't easy, and you know, they definitely worried when I was there and knowing I'd go back. But they too so appreciate what our military does and sacrifices that are made.
That's amazing. And your point about communicating and telling the story is really, you know, compelling. The way that we met, for any of the listeners who don't know, is through the Bob Woodruff Foundation. And Bob Woodruff, you know, started this foundation after he was injured while serving as a journalist or correspondent in Iraq. And the thing that I think is so phenomenal about that organization in particular, and similar, I think, reasons why you support it and continue to serve and get behind it, is being able to bridge that civilian-military divide, right? And so for us as service members, a lot of times we feel that sometimes it's hard to communicate to other people who just don't. It's very foreign to most Americans, right? And one of the most unique things about Bob Woodruff Foundation and the work that you continue to do and have done for the past, you know, 20 years essentially, is that you are unique, I think, in the journalistic, you know, environment, because you're continuing to go forward and to tell these stories and communicate it in a way that we can't always communicate it for ourselves. So that's been awesome.
And can I say one thing about that bridge? I think that's been really important to me, is to try to bridge that military and civilian divide. And I always say, though, to service members, when they talk about, look, we have our tribe, no one understands us, you know, we're doing this, nobody gets it. Like, okay, how many civilian friends do you have? You guys got to do your part too. You can't always just expect civilians to understand you and understand what you're doing. It's really hard unless you've been there. Some of my closest friends are spouses of military, and there were people who handled that well. There's Pete Corelli's wife is just amazing, and I spent a ton of time with General Corelli in Iraq. And Beth, as soon as I would get home, like, tell me everything. Tell me what it's like over there. And I loved that. And I felt like I could bring to Beth experiences that she couldn't, even though that was her husband over there. Or, you know, what is this like over there? Oh, I'm so jealous you got to see that and experience that. I loved that about military spouses I dealt with, because that helped them bridge that divide. But again, I would always say, you guys, you know, get in your little tribes. Just remember, you have to help people understand that either. You can't say, oh, they're idiots, they don't understand me. You have to help, and I do think that's what the Woodruff Foundation has done. Bob is a good friend of mine, and that was a pretty horrible day for all of us, and I had to report that live on the air, and that was tough. And there are days that I walk in the lobby here in this very same building and just remember walking in the lobby and getting a call from someone in Iraq saying, this does not look good. We're not sure he's going to survive. And then, 10 minutes later was on the air. Not saying that.
Yeah.
Just talking about what had happened. So it's, I have a special bond with the Woodruffs, and they've done such amazing work, and I'm proud to be on that board.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I had no idea that was the situation that you encountered at that time.
I got a call in the middle of the night, and from the producer who was with Bob, and Doug Vogt, who was also the cameraman who was injured, but not as badly as Bob. And she was just screaming, really, about what had happened and what had happened. And then I started making calls and found out more and more and more, too. And then, during the time he was in a coma, right here in D.C., or up at Bethesda.
Wow. Yeah, and to your point about service members, I think absolutely. I would almost say it's their duty, right? You should assume, anybody that's listening, you should assume that it's your job to educate other people, right? That whether you're in service or, have left the service, it's real simple to go internal and to not want to talk about things because you think people may not understand, but there's only one way they can find out, and that's if you tell them and educate them. And most people generally want to know, right? There's
Right.
sometimes I think a fear that people may not understand or don't get it, but
And the questions they're going to ask, right? So
Yeah.
you're like, all I want to know is whether I killed anybody. And but people don't know, and I think you have to assume they want to know from a
Absolutely.
good place.
Yeah,
From a
and
good place.
yeah, would agree 100%. Yeah, and so had you known Bob for a long time before his injury? No.
Yeah, I mean, Bob was a correspondent here. So I had known him before, because he was based in Washington before they moved to London. And then, of course, came back to be the co-anchor of World News when that happened. And, I feel very close to Bob and Lee. And those are some, it's like some tough days. So you have bonds there that are unbroken, and whether you talk to each other every day, you have that bond. And I have a bond with the soldiers who I wrote about and interviewed in 2004. I'm still very, very close to some of them, and in fact, I'd say, they're my best friends. Just went on vacation with them, and just there's that bond that just doesn't go away because you've all shared an experience, and I think for them, because it was so early in the war, and when it started getting really bad, it was the first time they'd ever talked about what they had just been through. I mean, I wasn't in that battle, but met them right afterwards, and having been that intimate and asking those painful questions, and I'm incredibly proud of that, and that I was able to tell their story in ways that really touched people too. So
yeah, it's amazing, and that was one of the things that I think is a trait that's somewhat ingrained for military service members, but isn't healthy, right? Is the ability to compartmentalize, and a lot of it's out of necessity due to survival, right? So those individuals who are involved in heavy combat and fighting still had another 6, 7, 8, 9 months to go, where they had to perform every day, and to be able to move forward from that. And so a lot of times the simple answer, or the more common answer, is to not discuss those things, not talk about it. But obviously, repressing those sorts of things and suppressing them inevitably leads to you just delay challenges and things like that, and sometimes make it harder to unpack at a later date. But yeah, I didn't know that, and that's impressive. Did you ever? So, once you had these first few experiences, what was it that continued to drive you back there? Was it the relationships, the people, or did you feel like a sense of? There's a saying from another foundation called the Travis Manion Foundation, who Travis Manion was a Marine officer, Naval Academy graduate, was killed, and their motto, which he said, was "If not me, then who?" And so, did you feel a sense of that after you?
Oh, I definitely felt a sense of that. And I felt like, I mean, it was still going on. It was still, it wasn't ending. And you just can't leave in the middle and not see what happens. And, you know, the people I knew were going back again and again and again. And I mean, when I look at the thread of people who I've known from very early on and where they are now and what they're doing now, and there's some people still over there. He's just retired in the last year or so, but Gary Valesky, who was a lieutenant colonel when I met him in 2004 and retired as a 3-star, and I was in every single deployment he was on, except for Ebola. I skipped that one. But everyone to Iraq, everyone to Afghanistan, and Gary was sort of that person who I could measure that war, or where we were and why we were there, and bring that back. And I also, Derek, I think I've been in a pretty unique position because a lot of the foreign correspondents are based overseas, or they're in the Baghdad Bureau, or they're in London. I have been in Washington, so where those policies are made, meeting the people who made those policies, being able to cover the White House and Iraq at the same time, and go to Iraq and come back and stand up in the East Room and say, President Bush, is this a civil war? Is this, what have you, and have him know that I was just there, gives you a big jump on credibility in terms of what you're talking about. And so I was proud of that, and I was proud to be able to take that experience. And in fact, when you look at Iraq, I mean, as criticized as everybody is over going into Iraq, I'm pretty proud of the fact that I think I helped the American people understand what was going wrong there. I remember when President Bush left office, I went to Crawford and interviewed him and said, you were telling us it was going well. Why were you doing that? And he said, well, something to the effect of I had to keep the morale up with the service members. I'm like, they knew it wasn't going well. If anyone knew it wasn't going well, they knew it wasn't going well. So it's just things like that, and to be able to bring experiences back and talk to policymakers about that. Or when I look at Afghanistan now, just thinking back of those 20 years, or not quite that, and the training of Afghan forces, and hearing all the things that people said over those years about how it was going. But I could see with my own eyes that, this doesn't really seem to be going that well. I mean, I remember in Iraq, same thing, there early on, the training when, policymakers are saying it's great and everybody's signing up, and it's like, wait, they may be signing up, but they're not showing up, because I can, so to just see all that with your own eyes is pretty remarkable to think back about all those experiences.
It's amazing. Yeah, and I think not only does it provide you with a level of credibility, but probably more contextual awareness than anybody, right? Because you have unfiltered access. You're unfiltered with your access to the information. You're seeing this firsthand primarily, and then seeing the other side. And it's really interesting. I thought a little bit about that after I'd gotten injured, because not my injury, but on the same mission I was on, we had a SEAL platoon come to reinforce us, and the decision to have that happen was driven by a particular policy that had happened, that had come down, despite the decision by different people in our team and guys on the ground to say, hey, we don't need them, we don't, but this was a specific instance of a policy, and then because of that, someone had gotten injured directly as a result of that. And so I still that was kind of the first time I'd realized and thought about, specifically with, rules of engagement and these sorts of things and just other types of policies, the direct impact that had on people. And that person turned out to be a guy named Dan Crenshaw. And so,
Oh,
so his
huh.
SEAL platoon had gotten called in from Kandahar to reinforce us as a quick reactionary force. The reason why was because during the incident where we got injured, we were receiving heavy volumes of accurate enemy fire and were pinned down with a small force at threat of being overrun. But our team decided to utilize air support and aerial munitions and to drop bombs to help keep us alive and fend off attackers. Due to the issues with civilian casualties and collateral damage, the policy then at that point was anytime you drop the bomb, a certain munition above a level, someone will go out there and walk and investigate the area. And so for us, it wasn't a big deal. For most people, that sounds like a decent policy,
Oh,
right? Like, send out a team to investigate, right? We don't want to kill any civilian non-combatants, and that was a really good idea. But in the area we were in the Helmand province, it was a minefield, and there were IEDs everywhere we went. And so we would
everywhere.
never do something like that, and we tried to address that issue, but as a result, we didn't have a say in the matter, and so unfortunately that was what led to the injury for Dan. And so,
Oh, wow. I
yeah,
didn't
and so
know
I still
about
think
that.
about that a lot, and I think over time it got worse and worse. But again, I don't have any ill will or judgment in that regard. It's people that don't have access to primary information or may have filtered access, and they think they're doing the right thing. And it's, and I'm not in their position, so I'm not in a position to judge. But it just really drove home the point to me for that. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
saw it up close.
So I know we're running short on time,
Peripheral.
but a couple last questions. So with respect to a lot of the things you've done, what's been some of the more challenging experiences you've had?
I think challenging wise, it's basically to try and not to try to get a more strategic view of things. I mean, if you're in it every day, you're in it. It's like you were on the ground there and you saw that policy and you saw this. Is to just step back. It's also, I mean, it's probably the most frustrating thing about being in Washington is interviewing people who have talking points. That's completely just stop with the talking points. That's frustrating. The debates I did were very challenging. I moderated the vice presidential debate in 2012 with Joe Biden and Paul Ryan, and I had no experience doing it. I hadn't been covering politics. I'd been in Iraq, and that was completely out of the blue. That I joke that it's like studying for the SATs and taking them in front of 60 million people. You it was terrifying, but it was also that thing you study as much as you can, you prepare as much as you can, and then when you do it, you've done your best. So, but I was proud of that. The 2016 debate was extremely challenging because that was Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and those debates had already been different.
I would say probably performing and moderating those debates was made you want to be back in combat in Iraq or Afghanistan, right? Like make you feel way more at home in that environment. I think to the point though, like, again, you embodied that ethos of if not me, then who, or if not me, then who, right? And we're willing to go forward and do that and take that on. And I think that's particularly noteworthy. So thank you, if I haven't said that before, for that and for all that you've done to help tell the stories of service members. Martha, it's been amazing chatting with you. Truly appreciate your time. I know you have to get back to work, but really appreciate you making time to chat with me and share some really interesting and insightful lessons. So thank you so much for joining me here on Forward, and truly appreciate your time.